Good afternoon, members of the media throughout the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. We're delighted to have you join us for this media conference at the conclusion of the 98th meeting of our Monetary Council. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce and invite to address you the Chairman of our Monetary Council, Dr. the Honorable Timothy S. Harris. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor Timothy Antoine. And as you have just said, we have completed the 98th meeting of the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. There is a communique which has been authorized by the Monetary Council, and as chairman, I will read this communique, and thereafter we will receive questions. The 98th meeting of the Monetary Council of the Central Bank was held today via video conference, and I presided over this event. The matters addressed were: 1, monetary stability. The Monetary Council received the Governor's report on monetary credit and financial conditions in the currency union for the period January to December 2020. The Council was apprised of the following. A, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impede global economic activity. Following a sharp rebound in global economic activity during the second half of 2020, global growth has once again slowed due to the resurgence of COVID-19 cases. According to the IMF January 2021 World Economic Outlook, the global economy is projected to grow by 5.5% in 2021, following an estimated decline of about 3.5% in 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic posed substantial economic and health-related challenges to our currency union in 2020, and the ECCU economy is estimated to have contracted by 15% compared to a projected pre-pandemic expansion of 3.2%. Tourism, the region's dominant export, is estimated to have declined by 75%, and the ECCU economy is projected to grow by 4% in 2021. Monetary and financial conditions remain stable. However, domestic monetary and credit conditions deteriorated in 2020 relative to 2019 due to shutdowns and related economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Domestic credit is estimated to have contracted in 2020 relative to 2019. Amid the challenging economic environment, the currency union experienced an expansion in its foreign reserve portfolio in 2020. However, the backing ratio declined on account of an increase in credit to member governments. The backing ratio as of the 5th February 2021 was 96.2%, which is well in excess of the statutory requirement of a 60% backing. The economic outlook for the region remains uncertain. The recent spike in the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in key source markets and in some member states in the currency union is undermining the prospects for recovery of the tourism sector and by extension growth in the currency union. That being said, the rollout of vaccines in these source markets and the arrival of vaccine in the ECCU member countries is seen as a positive development. Having considered the Governor's report on monetary, credit, and financial conditions in the currency union, the Council decided on the following. A, to maintain the minimum savings rate at 2%, and B, maintain the discount rate at 2% for short-term credit, and C, temporarily reduce the interest rate for long-term credit to 3.5%, down from the hitherto 6.5%. We paid attention to issues of financial stability, and in this regard, the Council was advised that overall, the financial sector in the currency union remained stable in 2020 despite the pandemic and the subsequent economic contraction. To date, none of the licensed financial institutions operating in the currency union has requested liquidity support from our central bank. Over 5 quarters ending 30th September 2020, there was an upward trend in non-performing loans, culminating with an average across the currency union of 11.2%. It is anticipated that the non-performing loans ratio will increase when the current loan moratorium expires in September of 2021. As at the 30th of November 2020, commercial banks were providing deferral on 16,834 loans, with a total outstanding balance of $4.3 billion. This represents 32% of all loans. Turning attention to fiscal and debt sustainability, we are advised that fiscal conditions across the currency union deteriorated in 2020 as government experienced a sharp decline in revenue, while simultaneously spending significant sums on COVID-19 related expenditure to protect lives and support livelihoods. Up to September 2020, the aggregate overall fiscal deficit was put at EC $261 million. This compares with a deficit of EC $135 million in the same period of 2019. Total revenue collections across the region declined by $777 million, while expenditure fell by EC $671 million. The performance of the regional government securities market remains relatively stable as member governments continue to meet debt service obligations and actively access the market to raise funds to support economic activity. Last year, ECCU government raised $1.1 billion on the regional government securities market. This represents a contraction of 15.7% compared to 2019. Turning to the proposal for the adjustment of the fiscal anchor, in 2003, the Monetary Council introduced simplified fiscal benchmarks to guide the operations of our ECCU countries. The key benchmark, fiscal anchor, was the achievement of a 60% debt to GDP target by the year 2020. The fiscal target was intended to facilitate fiscal credibility, transparency, and accountability. In February 2015, the Monetary Council extended the original target from 2020 to 2030 in the face of the prolonged recession in the ECCU, following, of course, the global financial crisis of 2008 onwards. In the face of the largest growth shock on record, occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Monetary Council considered the ECCB's recommendation to adjust the date for attainment of a debt-to-GDP ratio of 60%. The Council therefore approved the extension of the target date from 2030 to 2035. Given the ECCU's vulnerability to external shocks, member countries are encouraged to enact fiscal responsibility or fiscal resilience frameworks to support their fiscal efforts in the post-pandemic period. The Council made a clarion call for the promotion, adoption, and application of an appropriate vulnerability index for small states in consideration of their debt dynamics and for their access to concessional financing. Turning to the optimal regulatory framework for the financial sector, notwithstanding improvements in regulation and supervision by the central bank and national financial regulators in recent years, the Monetary Council was reminded that the ECCU financial system is supervised by multiple supervisory agencies. Consequently, there is no single regulatory agency with oversight of the entire financial system. Therefore, the legislative framework to support supervisory practices in the currency union is outdated relative to innovations in some areas of the financial system. The current situation creates opportunities for regulatory arbitrage. In light of this, the Council deliberated on a paper styled the optimal regulatory framework in the currency union, and after careful consideration, agreed to rescind the decision to establish the Eastern Caribbean Financial Services Regulatory Commission. Instead, the Council agreed to recommend to member governments, A, the adoption of an enhanced regulatory and supervisory approach based on retention of roles of the existing regulators and the addition of a regional standard-setting body for regional and national financial regulators. B, the establishment of a regional standard-setting body for our currency union. And C, the approval of governance of arrangements for the regional standard-setting body, similar to what obtains for the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, which, though based on the ECCB campus, is operationally independent and is overseen by a board of commissioners separate and apart from the Eccb Board of Directors. I turn now to a report from the Technical Core Committee and Insurance. British American Insurance Company BICO resolution. The Council received an update from the BICO Judicial Manager and noted that efforts were being made to make an additional payment to policy holders. With respect to CLICO, Colonial Life Insurance Company, the Council agreed on further engagement with the Government of Barbados in respect of the pensions fund arrangements. The Council was apprised of pending litigation in the CLICO matter. With regard to the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation, the Council received an update on the operations of the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation, which was launched on the 5th of October 2020. The Council noted that 7 commercial banks from 5 countries have been admitted to the program and are now participating lenders. Other banks will be onboarded soon. The Council also welcomed the Board of Directors' approval to admit credit unions and development banks to this program. The date and venue for the next meeting, which will be the 99th meeting of the Monetary Council, was agreed to, and that date is Friday, the 23rd July 2021, and it will be held by video conference. This meeting will be preceded by the ceremony to mark the change in chairmanship of the Monetary Council, which will be transmitted from the Eccb headquarters in St. Kitts and Nevis. We had a full representation from all member states. For the record, St. Kitts and Nevis was represented by Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Anguilla was represented by the Honorable Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster, Premier and Minister of Finance. The Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, represented the Commonwealth of Dominica, and the Honorable Gregory Bowen, Minister of Finance of Grenada, represented that country. From Montserrat, we had the Honorable Easton Taylor Farrell, the Premier, who also serves as Minister of Finance. From St. Lucia, Prime Minister, the Honorable Alan Chastney. And from St. Vincent and the Grenadine, its Minister of Finance, the Honorable Camilo Gonzalez. And then we have the Honorable Lennox Weston, Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance, representing the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. This represents the communique authorized by the Monetary Council for release. We hope it provides a sufficient sense of the many matters which were discussed today, and we are open to entertain questions from representatives of the media. We would ask that you be so kind as to identify yourself and your media house, and then you have license to pose your question. Thank you very much for taking part in this press conference. Is there anyone wishing to ask any question on any matter? Could we have an indication?
Good afternoon, Carlton Pickering from Creative Communication Network Television and Anguilla. First of all, I would like to extend congratulations to the governor for his second 5-year term as governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Now, in listening to the communique, there's one thing that I would like to get clear of, because is in place for struggling economies for the small states like, for instance, Anguilla. What do you have in place? Should we not able to get any economic growth?
Thank you for that question. We will take 3 questions and then we will respond. The governor of the bank has taken note of that question and we will proceed, but we would want to get perhaps 3 questions that will provide perhaps a more efficient way of getting through the conference. So is there any other media house wanting to put a question at this time? Okay, I will invite the governor. I want to thank the representative, Mr. Pickering, I think from Anguilla, for bowling the first ball. And it was a very important question, so I'll ask the governor to have a first go on that matter.
Thank you, Chairman, and let me thank you, Mr. Pickering, for your words of congratulations, and I look forward to working with you and the people of the Currency Union in this term, and ostensibly to help transform our region. In respect of the question that you posed, very important question, I will respond as follows. First, it's important for us that the first lesson in pandemic economics is to control the pandemic. First things first, because it disrupts everything, and we've seen that. That's our lived reality now for almost a year. So we have to keep our guard up. We're concerned about spikes we've seen in the currency union in some countries in the last few weeks. And we want to encourage people, now is not the time. Stay the course, help is on the way, keep your guard up. Related to that is the fact, and the chairman spoke to this in his statement, the vaccines have begun to arrive. And I know on the island of Anguilla, you have received your first set. I know the premier was vaccinated about a week ago. And I know Montserrat has also, and then several of our countries have this week received. That is the beginning of a very important process to protect our people and to allow us, in concert with vaccine rollout programs in our source markets, USA, UK, and Canada in particular, to be able to see our tourism recover. Because let us be clear, we cannot and will not see a full economic recovery until there's a full recovery of tourism. So there are positive developments where that is concerned. Now, we believe that there's strong pent-up demand for Caribbean tourism. People want to come to Anguilla. They want to come to our Fair Isles. And once they feel safe so to do, they will. So once we are able to get this pandemic under control with the measures that we have taken and are taking, we believe that there will be a snap back. But of course, in the intervening period, it is difficult. And our governments, we discussed at length today, things that we are doing and will do to provide additional support within the means of our governments in terms of raising financing for specific programs. One of the things that you saw in this communique presented by the chairman is the Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation. That is intended to help small businesses. What does that really mean? What is that all about? This corporation guarantees up to 75% of loans up to $300,000. So 75 of that, I think, is $225,000 for small businesses, which, by the way, account for at least 50% of the jobs in our economies. So that program was launched in October, as the chairman indicated. We now have 7 banks on board, and we're expecting more of those banks to come on board shortly. We now have credit unions starting to come on board, and we at least have so far 1 development bank. We expect that all 5 of our development banks will be participating lenders. So that is one initiative that is new, that is partly a response to the pandemic, although, of course, we had planned it before the pandemic. We continue to look at additional ways to mobilize resources, grants and soft resources for our countries in what is a difficult period, because we recognize even as we respond to the health issues and the care and relief packages, we also have to grow the economy. We have to invest in resilience, because whether we like it or not, the hurricane season is less than 4 months away. So those are real issues, and I think we're trying to tackle them, and I'll stop there.
Thanks. I would just like to add that one of the constraints and growth is the availability of affordable credit. So to go back to the partial credit guarantee scheme, that arrangement is intended to guarantee, as the governor just said, some 75% of loans. One of the inhibiting factors for small people engaging our traditional commercial banks and other financial institutions is the absence of collateral to be used as security for loans. In part, 75% of that is now taken care of, in a manner of speaking, through this particular partial credit guarantee scheme, which came on board in October of 2020. The good news out of all the dynamics of an uncertain world is that there is still a positive projection. In other words, the expectation that we will be moving from the abyss where we are at as a currency union, and we are going to be climbing out of the recession, all of the things, as it were, moving in a positive direction. We have some, of course, tools which we can use. And once we begin to look at the individual member states, and we look to see what are their growth drivers, tourism predominantly for most of us, but some also are more heavily merchandise, meaning agriculture, is still a critical part of the areas creating jobs, creating incomes, creating foreign exchange, particularly in the Windward Islands. In our part, we have to look to a return to near normal with respect to tourism. And a key handicap here will be how quickly globally, or at least within our source markets and within our region, the vaccination programs can achieve the desired outcomes, because there is a fear of travel because of the health risks associated with the COVID-19. So once we are, and our source markets are, appropriately vaccinated, and we have what is being described as the herd immunity, we expect that we are going to see more people wanting to come. And the Caribbean, relatively speaking, is better in that we have lower infection rates of the COVID-19. Generally speaking, there are exceptions to that when we go specifics. For our part, construction has been a critical growth driver. And so where we can, and I'm speaking for St. Kitts and Nevis specifically, although it has general application, our government, for example, for 2021, has budgeted about $192 million worth of capital expenditure, and about maybe 113 million or thereabout of that will specifically target construction, the building, for example, of a secondary school, the building of a correctional facility. All these are going to have construction activity happening, and therefore will conduce towards the attainment of positive growth. We look at agriculture. In our budget for 2021, we made specific provision for the agricultural sector to contribute more to food security, to job creation, providing avenues for young people and new people to come on board, making available lands, etc. And for the currency union as a whole, we have placed food security as a critical pathway for growth and the preservation of the health of the currency union. And we can go in the case of St. Kitts. Our manufacturing sector is an important one here. Few people are aware that St. Kitts and Nevis for years has been the largest exporter of merchandise product to the US. And largely this is the exporting of electronics and electrical products which are produced on island. And so we are hoping to get our manufacturing sector, small but important, with over 2,000 plus persons being employed in that sector in St. Kitts and Nevis, more fully engaged. I would say at this point in time, we are about 80% in terms of employee back to work, 80+% of them are. And we, just a few weeks ago, would have proved for the largest factory in the country, which hitherto had employed over 300 plus. We have approved for additional space, approved them as being COVID-19 compliant, and as a consequence of that, we are expecting about another 75 persons to be back out working, taking their total to just over 300. So sector by sector or subsectors, we are attempting to do things to recalibrate, to bring back life in the economy, and most importantly, put people back to work again. Because if they are at work, if they have confidence in the regularity of their inflows, we are going to see that reflected in other sectors. Retail and wholesale, for example, their patronage of our restaurants and hotel properties. And again, very slowly, we are seeing more activity in the hotel sector, not at the same level as prior to COVID-19, but certainly with the requirements for 14-day quarantine. And St. Kitts and Nevis has been very rigid in maintaining that gold standard. It means that every visitor that comes, whether a citizen or non-national, he or she has to spend 14 days in a guest house or in a hotel facility in St. Kitts and Nevis. That means that these facilities are going to require some of their workers back to work. They are going to require additional security to deal with the challenges of surveillance and monitoring of their guests. We have had, for example, to train and to bring on board to assist our police with the surveillance and monitoring 30 plus new employees appropriate trained in the public sector, and we should shortly commence another training of about 40 or 50. I said all this to say that tourism is a predominant sector for many of us, and so the growth trajectory is linked in large measure to the revival of the tourism sector, or us making significant growth in that area. But more than that, we have to now look at the other sectors to see how they could one be restored to pre-COVID-19 levels and then surpass that, and to look for other areas, limited as they are because we are so small, and so it's always difficult to find alternative pathway. But we have to find certain niche, even in tourism. For St. Kitts and Nevis, education tourism has been a big and major contributor to the economy for many years. We have had about 300 plus of our students at our largest offshore university being repatriated here. And we are expecting that by April we will have 600 plus of them. Now when they come, that means business for the landlords, those who are in the rental of residential properties. It means greater activity, rental agencies, the cars, etc., and of course, the places where people will go to dine. All these are going to have some multiplier impact across sectors and would help us to get in the right direction, even as we face the uncertainty regarding the tourism sector. So all is not lost. We continue to be hopeful. As the governor said, ultimately, in the end, we have to be a disciplined people in the context of the challenges we face and attempt to find opportunities even amidst the downside risks, which we are now challenged by in a significant way. Is there any further question? Sorry.
Can I follow up? About the system, and I'm looking at what you mainly said about the uncertainties of these economies. I'm looking at the banking system that you mentioned. And people during this COVID period are using the banking system extensively. What about the security and the stability of these banking systems? And secondly, you spoke about the agriculture sector and food security. Now, are we just looking at food security and not food nutritional security for our people? Because that is important in this pandemic.
Thank you very much for those follow-up questions. They are very good questions. I'll turn the one on the banking and the security to the governor to answer. More specifically, in terms of the agriculture, when we speak about food security, there is a built-in understanding that it must be food that will add to our wellness, our health, and our well-being. Again, using our own situation here, we have provided additional resources in the 2021 budget for our farmers to target some 10 specific crops, which we consider to be important for health and wellness. Some of them are alternative starch to, for example, the importation of rice. And of course, we have to engage the consuming public, the general public at large, about the need to support local, so that the investment which we are making and which we are asking the farmers to make will be a dividend. So they have to be an important commitment from our restaurant to buy local, sell local. In this regard, we are providing support, for example, for fish, which is a rich source of protein. And again, we want to have more people using our fisheries products. We have a wide range from lobster to, you call a name. We have them here, somewhat seasonal, but we are working on that through the investment in what they call the FADs, the fisheries aggregate devices, to help yield better harvests for our people. So food security is important. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we are attempting to set specific targets, get a clearer understanding of which products we are going into. Will we be getting more, for example, in the broiler aspect of the poultry? We are self-sufficient for 11 months of the year in the production of eggs, and we are looking at the next element, basically getting into chicken parts. And so we want to target support to those who are interested in these specific areas. The Caribbean region, and St. Kitts is no exception, is a large importer of poultry products. So if we can get that economic activity going at home, this, of course, would be helpful to us. Will create more opportunities, more potential for income earning, create perhaps a new kind of local entrepreneurship, which we all can be proud of. So, Governor.
Chairman, for a moment I thought you were also the Minister for Food and Nutrition Security, the depth with which you spoke to the matter. But that's good to see, because we do want our leaders to lead on this question of food and nutrition security. On the banking question, I'll say the following. The truth is that our banks have played a very useful role in this period. Essentially, the loan deferral program is a shock absorber for businesses, individuals, and even governments that have been adversely impacted by the pandemic. And I want to commend, again, the ECCU Bankers Association, who work with us at the Eccb to deliver this relief. Now, at the height of this program, the loan deferral program, the moratorium, there were about 26,000 loans that were benefiting with a loan value of $5.3 billion. Since then, some individuals, businesses have been able to make arrangements to restructure their loans. And so that number has now fallen to just under 17,000. And as you would have seen in the communique read by the chairman, that program goes until September 2021. Now, after that, we are likely to see some increases. We will see some increases in non-performing loans. But as the chairman also indicated in the communique, so far, almost 1 year into this pandemic, we have not received a request for liquidity support from any of our banks and licensed financial institutions. And that is significant because our institutions were very liquid, strong liquidity buffers going into the pandemic. Many of them, most of them, are also highly or well capitalized. And those are very important buffers in and of themselves to help the banks play the role that they're playing now. I should add, when we mentioned the Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation and the program a little earlier, one of the things that the CEO advised our council today is that in response to a request from the banks, which is of course coming from small businesses, they are just launching today a product for working capital, because they recognize some of our small businesses, given the squeeze and given the loan deferral program, they need working capital, and they are going to make that provision for, I think, up to 12 months to give them to tie them over as well. So we're going to continue to work with our banks in this period. We work with them very closely. We monitor them on an ongoing basis. If they need liquidity support, they can come to the ECCB for that. But so far, they have not come. And by the way, I mentioned banks because ECCB supervises banks and, institutions licensed under the Banking Act. But we also are in dialogue with credit unions, for example, which play a very important role in our financial system, increasingly so. And like us in the banking system, they have also been doing a similar role in terms of loan deferral, support for members, and they also have access, the credit unions, to the Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation. So we will continue to work with our institutions in this difficult period. We have experience in this region of working through difficult times, whether they're hurricanes, whether they're global financial crisis, and so on. And we continue to work with our financial institutions to ensure that they have the support of the central bank, advised and as also monitoring in this period. But we will see an increase in non-performing loans later on in the year, and we will have to continue to manage that process. It's a little bit, and I don't say this with any relief or joy, it's a little bit like high blood pressure. You kind of have to manage it and manage it down over time. Because the truth is, before the pandemic, non-performing loans were already high, around 10%. They're going to go a bit higher now. So we have to manage them down, just like we manage high blood pressure in a sense, that condition, until we can get them down. Now, mind you, there are institutions that are under the 5% mark, but on average, we're above, and so we have to continue to monitor that very closely.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from Anguilla or any other country?
Good afternoon. German email, Fiscal Deficit. Just a quick question to the governor. It has to do with the banking sector. We saw the sale of, I'm trying to remember it, First Caribbean, CIBC, being canceled basically because of, from the regulators, probably from the Eccb or so forth. In terms of discussion and feasibility of the banks within the region, and now that we're looking at the COVID-19 pandemic, what sort of feedback, if any, and would you have received, Eccb would have received from these financial institutions, specifically in the currency union? And with regards to going forward, was this something that was discussed at the meeting? And also, if you could comment on the sale of the RBC in the region.
Yes, Governor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So on the question, the last question of RBC, the ECCB has approved the application for the sale of the RBC operations in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union to a consortium of indigenous or national banks. That process is now moving forward, and an announcement will be made in due course, but the idea is to conclude that transaction not too long from now. So that is moving forward. In fact, I can tell you only yesterday, we submitted to the finance ministers a vesting order or vesting orders, which is an important legal instrument to transfer assets from one bank or bank entity or banking entity to another. So that process is moving forward. In terms of the sale of CIBC, I didn't get your question, so I'm not sure what the ask is. I would simply confirm what you said, that the regulators across the region considered it. Barbados, Central Bank of Barbados is the lead regulator based on the jurisdiction of FCIB, CIBC, FCIB, but all regulators, including the ECCB, were involved in that discussion and came to that decision, which has been conveyed, and you are correct, the application was denied. I'm not sure if I missed the third question, but if you wish to repeat, perhaps I can pick it up.
Just to get a sense from ECCB whether or not it would have received a feedback from some of the financial institutions within the currency union in terms of their current state based on the impact of COVID-19. I know we talked about the business sector and non-performing loans and all of that. So did the ECCB get a formal feedback in terms of the impact on the financial institutions in the region, the sub-region, based on COVID-19? And was that something that was discussed at the meeting?
Just to be clear, we are in touch with our financial institutions on a daily basis. It's our job. They communicate with us. So for example, this week, and this is public knowledge, a couple of our branches, one in Antigua and Barbuda, one in St. Lucia, had to be closed because a member of staff was exposed to COVID-19. Clearly, that means a closure. That has an impact on the public. We have to be informed. We have to guide and advise where necessary. And sometimes it's just to be informed. There's nothing we can do there except to take note and make sure that the protocols are followed, meaning not just the health protocols, but the communication to the public. So we are in constant communication on that. The question of payment of dividends or not paying dividends, the question of provisioning for non-performing loans, those are constant discussions, and we provide regulatory guidance. That means formal, in-writing guidance to all licensed financial institutions. So today, as part of the governor's report, I would have updated the Monetary Council on the situation in the financial system across the currency union. And we highlighted, the chairman highlighted some of those issues in terms of stability in the system, the question of NPLs, moratorium, and that sort of thing. But it's an ongoing discussion we have with the banks. We've discussed, and we provide advice. So whether it is provision, for example, IFRS 9, the application of that standard, the National Financial Reporting Standard 9, how does that apply and how does that affect their financial statements. We work with them on all of these things, in addition to what, of course, they will get from the external auditors. So we are in close contact with all of our licensed financial institutions.
Continue to receive questions, input from the media. Is there an ongoing interest? Any further questions? If not, we want to say a hearty thank you to the representatives of the media who came, and in particular thank the distinguished representatives out of Anguilla and St. Kitts and Nevis for putting some very important questions to us. We thank you all, and we hope that the communique will, once you would have had a chance to read it, would provide you with additional information. The central bank, of course, remains on guard to be able to respond to any further issues you may have with respect to the communique. Again, on behalf of the Monetary Council, I want to say thank you to all the representatives of the media. Until next time, we wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much for accommodating us.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Blessings.